Sinkhole in Australia?
Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On this week's docket, we had some good action out in Austin, Texas this weekend. Pre-fight in the Fighter Hotel, post-fight during Dana White's visit with the media, and of course, inside the octagon. We're going to discuss it all. Gorgeous George here on the con, and look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Sin City and Dallas are in the house. We got Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here in Las Vegas. He created the SBC, by the way. On my personal Mount Rushmore of guys who can break down fights, it's the fight analyst, Dan Tom, also in Sin City. And rounding out the cast, it's Matt Wells from the editorial side, also a big Dallas Cowboys fan. We need you this week, Matt. I don't say that too often. I don't like them Cowboys, but we need you this week. Cold Coffee, he's on the ones and twos. We got 5 great topics. Let's dig in. All right, we're going to go in reverse here and start with the post-fight action. According to UFC president Dana White, Austin was a success. Monster gate and attendance. In fact, it was the biggest gate ever for a fight night in the USA. And White rolled out $50K bonuses for every fighter, plus fight of the night. Salute, UFC and Dana White. But at some point, the happy boss seemed to get a little agitated when asked about PFL-Bellator and the PFL saying their roster is comparable to the UFC's. In fact, it was our own Matt Wells that was on the mound at that moment. I guess White thought that you were brushing him back, Matt. Anyways, my question to you guys to start things off. Guys, do you think Dana White and the UFC are threatened by the new number 2 MMA promotion? Matt, we go to you since you were there, man.
Yeah, I mean, to start off to your points, I will agree. You know, the event itself was amazing. It felt like a huge event. All the numbers kind of show that, right? But yeah, like you said, after the facts, you know, I asked him about PFL buying out Bellator, and he kind of took exception to it. I'm not sure if Dana is more so feeling like a threat of that merger, so to speak, or if he's just kind of annoyed at these questions. Because obviously, like, the UFC is still number one in all of these things, right? But yes, I mean, it's still a valid concern when you have 2 companies that were considered number 2, number 3 joining forces, right? I mean, just look at these names that they have under their roster. I mean, the Bellator side, you have Patchy Mix, Vadim Nemkov, Johnny Eblin. These are all their champions. Ryan Bader. These are guys that could come over to the UFC and pick up wins over top competition. Without a doubt. I mean, Usman Nurmagomedov, Pitbulls, Jason Jackson, Amasov. PFL has very respectable names as well. I mean, Larissa Pachenko, Renan Ferreira, Jesus Pinedo just won the championship this year. OAM, who was a UFC vet. I mean, Jesus Pinedo was also in the UFC. He had one fight there as well. Magomed Karimov. These are all very talented fighters. So the roster is there. It's a very solid roster. It's not on par with the UFC's just yet. It's not as deep. But they have very respectable names there. And I think that maybe, if anything, the UFC is kind of having to, you know, turn their head and look at that a little bit. But in terms of business and, you know, arenas and things like that, I don't think they're worried about that too much because, you know, to Dana's point, like he said, you know, what are their numbers like when they're running arenas and stuff like that? What are their ticket sales? Yeah, they're not nearly comparable, but they are building something. And they have the opportunity to grow into something bigger after this PFL move. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out, obviously, over the next year or two and see what kind of momentum they can get going. But I think at this point, like right now, I think Dana's kind of a little bit more annoyed that, you know, hey, guys, we're still number 1. We're still UFC. We're still on top of these things. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's something that you have to address, and you do have to acknowledge, hey, they're making moves.
Mm-hmm. Did you think, Matt, that in any way he was unfair, I guess, and I wouldn't say attacking you, but kind of like trying to light you up, for asking the questions? I mean, I think media like to ask questions that the fans are wondering.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to do. I mean, obviously these are questions that fans want the answers to, right? And I think that was most of the questions that I did ask him on that night were stuff that fans want to know about. I think he did try to come at me a little bit, but I mean, he tried to take it to a place where I wasn't trying to go as well. Like I wasn't trying to get into the weeds about ratings and stuff like that. One, because we don't have those clear answers. Networks hide the true numbers from us. Try to get an accurate rating from ESPN Plus or Showtime or something like that. It's just not happening. So I wasn't trying to go there with him. I was just trying to get his general thoughts about things. If you go back and watch that clip, I tried to move on from that question twice, but he kept going back in, kept going back. So it is what it is. But yeah, I think he did try to come at me a little bit, but it is what it is. I wasn't trying to go back and forth with him either. I was just trying to get an answer. I was happy with his first response when he said he wishes them well. I was like, cool. All right. So on to the MVP thing is what I was trying to get to. But, Dana's going to do his thing. Sometimes we've seen him do that to multiple reporters before. I don't know if he expected me to try to actually answer him or not, because sometimes reporters don't actually answer him when he throws questions back. So, I just had a little playful banter, I thought.
Was that your final interaction of the night with him, or at some point when it was over, was there a finger point like, hey, it's just the game, or anything like that, I guess?
No, I mean, after that, I threw two more questions at him, and he seemed pretty receptive to those, I guess. But yeah, he definitely seemed a little bit agitated by the PFL question.
Mm-hmm. Dan, Tom, what do you think, man? So just like all of us, we've covered the sport for a while. We've seen a lot of Dana White reaction to a new promotion. It's not the first time. What do you think, man? Do you think in any way he's threatened by the new #2 MMA promotion?
I don't think he should be threatened, but like the way he is answering Matt, he's definitely agitated, right? And I just want to give props to our colleague Matt there, for standing his ground, but still being completely respectful, professional. Just kind of like everything you want to see, whether it's coming from a colleague like myself or the fans and the audience out there. I know you guys are really critical of media, and that's fine, but appreciate when people do a good job. So a hat tip to our guy Matt there. But as far as Dana goes, it seems kind of silly to be so upset, not just because of all the facts that we know and that Matt did a great job laying out there, but the other dynamic I guess I'll introduce is the lawsuit right now for a monopsony. And it just really seems that I got to imagine the lawyers are cringing every time Dana White gets out there and just makes these chest flexing comments, which is not abnormal for Dana White. But again, the particular topic, the way he's getting upset and really looking at the big picture, maybe especially as a pro-capitalist guy, like maybe you should embrace the competition here a bit, and instead of making the monopsony case kind of look like apples and apples right now. But that's just my 2 cents. It seems kind of silly, and I do wonder if like the higher ups and brass are like, Dana, take it easy, man. Come on.
I echo what you said, Dan. First of all, in terms of props to Matt Wells, I've seen those interactions over time, and there's times where a reporter just shuts down, and Matt kept doing his jobs, pushing through, and like he said, another series of questions later on. But for folks that don't understand, it's not our job to go back and forth with him. It's our job to ask the questions and move on. Sometimes Dana makes it personal, and that's just part of the job. All right, Goes, how about you, man? You got a psych degree. Read into this guy. Worth $500,000, successful promotion, crushed yet another gate for a fight night, all that stuff you heard. But yet, man, he lets a question that's, part of the big news cycle in the last 2 weeks kind of ruin his day a little bit, and then he kind of makes it a little bit personal. What do you think? You think he feels threatened?
I don't know that he feels threatened. I think he just feels like, why can't people just give me my props for what I've done? What he's done has been completely amazing. But when people bring up these little topics, it does tend to bother them. And I think it doesn't have to really do with the situation. I bet you a lot of it comes from just what happened with Francis Ngannou not too long ago. That was not a good look for the UFC, right? And that's something that every time it gets brought up, it pisses them off. And I think it's just that thing that where he's on a high and he's happy about what happened tonight, and then he gets asked that question, and it takes him somewhere else that really it shouldn't. It's a valid question. I think if you're the UFC, maybe you should feel a little threatened, but not that much. I mean, people aren't going to stop watching the UFC and watch PFL-Bellator instead. They're not going to lose viewers to them. What they may lose a little bit in a threat to them could be maybe like contract negotiations going forward, right? What's going to happen when you have a fighter that has like a 5, 6 fight win streak? Sometimes they get as high as like 10, 12 fights in a row. Are you telling me they're not going to sit there and go, man, if I did this in PFL, I'd have $2 million in the bank, right? They're going to complain a little bit more. They're going to be more inclined to maybe leave and go to a PFL and try and pick up $1 million or fight in a Grand Prix, whatever it is they're going to do moving forward. I think fighters will maybe try and use that leverage a little bit. Some of the stuff that Francis Ngannou was able to do, go and box, right? We don't, other than Conor McGregor, we don't really see that too much with the UFC. So I think in a way, more than anything, the PFL is going to annoy the UFC and they're going to annoy the brass. And after a while, you know, when you combine two rosters like that, you're going to put on some pretty decent fights. They're going to have some victories. They're going to have some good nights where we're all spinning Back Clique on Monday. The first thing we're going to talk about was that crazy PFL card where some of them Bellator fighters came over and put on a great show. And I'm sure if you're the UFC and you tune in, you're going to be like, man, why are they talking about them? They should be talking about us. Look at our gates. Look how many people are showing up. I think they're going to pester them, but I don't think it's to the point that Dana needs to react in that way. Because of his reaction, that's why we're here talking about this right now. If he just would have kind of gave Matt a softball answer and just said, hey, look, you know, good for them. They'll do their thing, but we're over here. We're crushing it. We're doing that. We probably wouldn't be talking about this right now, right? And that's what I don't understand about Dana White. Sometimes I feel like he's his own worst enemy in that sense.
What's funny goes is they kind of did do it, and then he hesitated, and then something boiled within him, and he had to attack the ratings and their attendance. But you know, I was thinking, because I was watching this live, I was thinking recent news was that ESPN re-upped with PFL-Bellator, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's your partner.
Cutting over me.
What's that?
I was trying to get that part out, but he kept jumping over me as well.
Yeah, you know, they just re-upped with the PFL-Bellator and PFL. I'm joking, right, guys? But they just re-upped with them, so they must think something of their ratings. I highly doubt that on Mondays in Bristol, Connecticut, they say, "Hey, I got a sharp business move. Let's re-up with a promotion or a sport that's not bringing some eyeballs." I mean, that just wouldn't happen, right? That's their partner, and their partner just made that decision. By the way, this is their 5th year, I believe, with PFL. So there's got to be something to that. Now, I'm not saying Dana White is wrong about gates, attendance, things like that, but I don't know. It just seems so. We give this guy praise for being an awesome promoter, for doing incredible things in the sport, and at the same time, I just feel someone that's been in the sport for that long should be so savvy at taking these questions that it shouldn't really agitate them at this point. Now, as I say that, look, I seen LeBron blow up, Jordan, Brady. You know, you get the same question a certain amount of times. I guess it's like, you know, how many times do I have to cover this? But he's not for sure that Matt was at the press conference that he covered it the first time. This is a different media member that's getting access for the first time, maybe just following up.
But he's not getting asked that question while he's at the Olive Garden, right? Leave me alone. I'm having dinner. Not that I go to the Olive Garden, but you know what I mean? He's getting asked that at work. That's his job. That's where he's going to get that question. Yeah. And not only that, he should be expecting that question. So if anything, it's not like he's sitting back on, oh man, I can't believe they brought that. That's right. That just happened. He knows it's coming. He should have something already prepared, but he lets the best get out of him. Like the worst, sorry. It just, the moment gets the best of him, man, and that shouldn't be the case.
Here's how you guys know it was bad. When I went to rewatch this, of course I did it on the MMA Junkie YouTube channel. Give this a like, if you're watching, or make sure you're subscribing to that channel, of course, guys. But if you look at the comment section, the YouTube comments are never a kind place, much less to the media. And even like the Dana, it's bad because even the Dana White fans lately in the comment section are like, Dana, I'm the biggest Dana fan, but man, what's going on with this guy lately? Like, what is going on? Like, so we're not alone here, folks. Even as staunchest supporters, we're like totally like, which is great, as they should be. We're totally giving Mattis props, and we're like, what's going on with Dana here? So we're not alone in this.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to throw out there as well. I've seen a couple of people, again, the comments, right? Comments are going to be comments, saying that, why are you asking about PFL? I mean, it's a very relevant question to ask about what's going on in the MMA space to the biggest promoter in the sport. It's a very relevant question, especially when those are two companies, like they sign UFC fighters. Sometimes we'll see the UFC pick up some of their fighters. It's a very relevant question. So anybody saying that, don't be silly.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna hear, if you're a top name, you're gonna hear questions all the time. Imagine Lionel Messi wins the World Cup in Argentina, and so they're asking him questions there in Qatar. When he gets back to Argentina, someone's going to ask him about that World Cup and that win. I doubt he's going to say, you didn't hear what I said in Qatar? I thought I covered this. I mean, this is huge news. And like Ghost said, spin it in a way so that it maybe helps anything that you have that's ongoing. Hey, competition's good. They have some quality fighters there, some that have been with our promotion, and maybe some that one day will be in the promotion. Who knows? There's got to be some stock answers after 25 years of covering the sport where you can just go out there and deal with this. Look, young Barry Moore in the chat is saying, asking Dana White about the PFL is like asking a buddy, have you seen your ex-girlfriend, knowing she's really looking fine and doing really good now. Nuru says Dana White knows he fumbled the Ngannou boxing bag and hates any PFL reminders too soon. Ha ha ha. Folks, if you want to submit questions and comments via the chat, I will do my best to get to as many as I can. And obviously, the better they are, maybe the funnier they are. Touch of humor is never bad. I will see if I can sneak them in. You can address the guys personally or just throw them out in general. King of all Chad says, you're at a UFC press conference. Why talk about stuff that isn't UFC? Okay, take that one on, Matt. What do you think of that comment? Not that we haven't, I guess, kind of touched on it already.
Yeah, that's kind of like to what I was just saying, right? Because these are two relevant things. PFL and Bellator joining forces. They're now the solid number 2 in the space. And like I said, UFC will sign the best talent available, right? They picked up Michael Chandler from Bellator, so like they're obviously paying attention to what's going on there. So yes, why would I not ask about the second biggest promotion in the MMA space right now? I mean, that's a very huge move. It's something that could change the landscape of the sport in the next few years coming up, depending on how this new look PFL, this new look Bellator progresses from here. So it's a very relevant question.
Yeah, they picked up Eddie Alvarez. They picked up Ben Askren. People have come over from other promotions as well. They tried to recruit with Kayla Harrison. It just didn't work out, but it's not like they don't keep an eye on it. So solid stuff there. All right, guys, listen, keep them coming through the chat. I'll do my best to incorporate them all. We got to move on. Let's talk about Arman Tsarukyan's win. According to Dana White, it threw a wrench in the title picture. Makhachev has beaten both Tsarukyan and Oliveira before. Charles Oliveira, excuse me. But the difference is the first Tsarukyan fight was not a title fight. So, yeah, slight difference. Should the UFC reconsider Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira 2? Dan Tom, what do you think?
It's tough. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but I'm going to give my kind of stock answer here to remind you guys that this is kind of the beach ball they throw at us, to get us excited and they give us something to talk about. But really, Dana White's kind of like the dad, sending off his kids to run to the refrigerator, to compete against each other. Who can get me the beer first? Whoever gets me the beer first is the best kid. It's not who the best kid is. Dana White just wants his beer from the fridge. And what I'm trying to say here is the UFC, we know this. They just need to fill their schedule. Things can happen in the sport. It's a volatile sport anyways, to be hard to predict anybody who's going to be next for the title. But as far as the UFC trend goes, it's not even really their ranking systems that, have been installed and argued upon for almost a decade now. No, it is the content schedule to ESPN, who we were just talking about. That is the ultimate decider in these things.
Mm-hmm. All right. Goes, what do you think, man? Should they reshuffle the deck in the UFC lightweight division? No Makhachev versus Oliveira 2, and if so, Tsarukyan, is he ready to step in, or what do you think?
I think the UFC kind of made it clear that Oliveira was just the direction that they were going in. I think when they say things like this, what it is sort of a warning to the guys underneath, right? If you're saying, I'll fight him, but I don't want to fight him in city A, I want to fight him in city B, or I want to get paid this much. I think it's just that little reminder we can always go another route, right? But it seemed like that's what they wanted to do. As far as Tsarukyan goes, I don't blame him. You have to say those things. At the end of your fight, you have to take the mic and you have to promote yourself. He did nothing wrong. All of that stuff he had to do. It was a great performance over a great fighter in Beneil Dariush. But I think we need to pump the brakes just a little bit, just a little. Because past Oliveira, let's just say they don't do that. They're still Justin Gaethje, right? If you look at Justin Gaethje's 2 wins, those are pretty strong too. And I know Sarukyan's on a 3-fight win streak, but the 2 might outweigh those 3. So I think it puts Tsarukyan kind of in a rough spot because like a guy like Dustin Poirier, he's kind of come out and said he doesn't want to fight these guys. He just wants the really, really big names. So Tsarukyan's kind of stuck with kind of the outside looking in, those types of fighters that are left. I think he's probably going to have to get one more before he gets in there. And if he does, I know it's going to sound crazy because the guy suffered a loss, but no matter who you take at that point, it's going to be roughly the same level. Somebody, maybe on a 1-fight win streak, maybe a 2-fight or something like that. At that point, man, why not just squash this Bobby Green, the beef that you have with him? And at least you could sell us on that, get another quality win. And then I think that top will kind of play itself out. But I don't blame Arman Tsarukyan one bit for asking to be put in that spot. And I actually don't blame business-wise the UFC for even kind of hinting that could be a possibility.
All right, and lastly, we go back to Matt. Matt, you were there. Did it just sound like Dana White maybe tossing some out there to make things interesting, or was he that blown away by Tsarukyan's performance that he's saying this, possibly throwing a wrench in his plans? How did you read Nuru and Original Cood's Hero's eyes that night?
I mean, I thought it was a fantastic performance by Arman, right? And I think Dana's words were pretty on point there. You have to at least consider this now. I mean, Arman looked unstoppable. He looked, very much like a real title contender. And I would like to see them kind of, I wouldn't be mad if they do throw him in there against Islam next. There's history there. They obviously fought once in 2019. And the difference is between when Arman fought Islam, it went to a decision. It was a unanimous decision win for Islam, but he didn't get finished. So you can't say the same about Charles. And I'm not a fan of the UFC automatically, throwing former champions into title fights. Let's let a contender get a shot. So why not put Arman in there? He's coming off of 2 stoppage wins. And like I said, he's got that history where him and Islam went to a decision. So who knows how it looks this time around with 5 rounds? Who knows?
Matt, what about the BMF? Justin Gaethje, you're going to upset him. And what about Matthias Gamrot, who beat Tsarukyan about 18 months ago and was tagged as the alternate for the original, let me say this straight, Makhachev Oliveira 2 fight, which didn't happen, as we all know. Volkanovski said stuff aside, Gamrot. But what about those guys?
Listen, like Arman said, Justin's already got his title, that BMF title. So let him, hold on to that for a little bit. But no, in all seriousness, however you want to shake out this top of this division is fine with me at the end of the day, because they're all fantastic fights. Like, fans aren't going to lose with any matchup, no matter. Throw them all these names in a hat, just shake them up. Like, if that's what you're doing as a matchmaker, I would be actually okay with that. Like, film like a little surprise lottery thing in the back. Put all the names in a little turnstile thing.
Yes.
Just pull them out. Hey, here's the next matchup for the lightweight title. And I guarantee you nobody's going to be mad at the names that come out.
I'd love to see a 16-man Grand Prix in the UFC in the lightweight division. Like you said, just pull the names out of a hat. The champion defends along the way. But guess what? Instead of $1 million, we're going to give the winner $10 million. It'll take about 18 months to get through it, but we're going to get through it, folks. That would be, to me, tremendous. It'd be like announcing a college football playoff or just something out of the woodworks, stepping things in another direction. Because right now, I understand the way things work, and it's cool. But yeah, it just does seem to work, like Dan says, and he said it often. He's made that point often. Suitable to what's on the schedule and who's available, and that's just not my cup of tea.
But
Personally.
if it's a college football playoff, then we'd have to exclude all the undefeated fighters, right?
Exactly.
Florida
What a
State
mess.
took it. Oh man, in the rear on that one. Geez, that was terrible. An undefeated team who wins their conference. Holy cow, that was highly disappointing. Original Coot in the chat says they need to let Gagey fight. He's on the downside of his career. He deserves it. Well, not necessarily because he's on the downside. I think he's fighting well, Original, but I think they made it clear the winner of that BKFC fight, BMF fight, had an inside track towards the title. I'd like for them to follow up on that. Anyway, they say a lot of things. We got to move on though. Oh no. I do have a follow-up for you guys. And Goes, you may have already touched on it. Dan and Matt, whoever wants to go first. If they don't do Tsarukyan versus Makhachev, they stay with Makhachev Oliveira too. What do you do with Tsarukyan? Dan, you go first.
For Tsarukyan, that's tough. By the way, Gamrot did beat him, but for those that are listening and not watching, I did the air quotes things with my hands because if you watch the match and or read the criteria in conjunction, you'll know that Arman Tsarukyan should have won that fight, arguably 4 rounds to 1, not even 3. So maybe you can run that back with a little bit of controversy there. It'd be a tough sell for Gamrot because again, he already did the weigh-in thing. And even with fighters who, they weren't too excited at first, they gave the long routes to Kamaru Usman back in the day. You saw a lot of the times it was them weighing in as the alternate that got him that shot. And, say what you will about the UFC. I definitely say it all the time. That being said, they do say a lot of things, right? And I totally sentiment with what George said. But they do seem, in their defense, for whatever consistency that they can claim, they do seem to take care of those fighters who do those positions. So whoever mentioned that earlier, that Gamrot did him that solid, that is kind of the pocket aces perhaps that Gamrot has in the equation.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what do you think? What do you do with Tsarukyan if they don't give him a title shot?
If they don't give him a title shot, I think the best fight would be Gaethje, even though Gaethje wants to be in a title fight in his next one out. So, I mean, you're talking about a true title eliminator right there if you make that matchup.
Mm-hmm. Do either one of you kind of feel Goes on Green versus Tsarukyan, even though one of them got starched and the other one had an amazing win? Does that heat bring them together? Goes kind of threw his fist up there and neither one of you really tapped it. What, you guys aren't feeling that one?
I think Bobby Green needs a long break, first of all. And that would be a tough matchup, even if Tsarukyan didn't look like he was finally coming into tune with his knockout power, which it looks like he is. And that could be a really scary thing. If we've got a wrestle boxer here who doesn't really even need to wrestle, he can just, kind of score the knockouts. And, Bobby Green with, there were suspicions about his chin before this. And now, who knows after what that poor guy just went through. So, yeah.
Let me tell you guys this much. If it doesn't happen in the cage, it's going to happen somewhere else. So you might as well make it happen in the cage.
Possibly. Yeah. All right. Let's move on here. So Mike Perry was crowned King of Violence over at BKFC. BKFC 56 took place this past Saturday. He defeated Eddie Alvarez in the main event. And so to me, Mike Perry joins Luis Palomino in the category of fighters who have been more successful at bare knuckle than MMA. These two guys have become big stars over at BKFC. What active MMA fighter could you see following in their footsteps? And chat, I challenge you to come up with some names as well. I'm going to toss it to the guys. Goes, who do you think, man, could follow in the footsteps? They didn't suck at MMA. I didn't say that. They've just done better at BKFC than in MMA. And you kind of know the ingredient Goes now that we've seen a few guys move over. You gotta obviously be able to throw some hands.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's got to make sense, right? Like, I actually enjoyed when Michael Venom Page went to BKFC. I thought he did a lot better than most people thought he was going to do. And so what him and a few other fighters have done is showed us a little bit of a recipe for success. I know he lost that fight, but if you look at guys like an Austin Trout that went over there, even guys like Luis Palomino, what he's been able to do, not every fight has to be violence. It doesn't have to be this chaos. You can actually use your skills in there and get away with it. You just have to have that right game plan and the right opponent. So that being said, I think a guy like Clay Collard, right, from the PFL, who probably is up to here with tournaments and all that, he has a boxing background. He goes to the body. He's pretty smart with the way he fights, and he's got that fun personality. I think he could go over there and do something a lot better than what it is he's doing over at the PFL. If anything, just maybe a little break. You know, he's done the season quite a few times. Go out there and do some BKFC. I think he would be fun. And then another guy, I think Lorenz Larkin from Bellator. I don't know what his contract status is, but I think a guy like that have a lot of fun in BKFC. I'm telling you guys, like, I know we asked the question at the press conference about Bellator, PFL, the merger and all that, but BKFC, I've found myself on a Saturday night, a Friday night, very entertained with that product. If anything, I think they're kind of sneaking up and stealing some of my money on the weekends.
Mm-hmm. All right, I like it. Matt, how about you? Who do you think could join Mike Perry and Luis Palomino as fighters who could be more successful at bare knuckle than mixed martial arts?
Yeah, I don't know if he'd be more successful than he was in mixed martial arts, but a guy whose name was attached to this UFC Austin card. How about Dan Hooker? You know, talk about a guy who will stand in the fire and trade and loves the violence. Like, that's a guy who's an absolute dog in there, right? Long, rangy striker, getting in there, like, that would be perfect for bare knuckle, I think. He's also seems to have that little bit of like madman in him, right? Kind of like Mike Perry, where it's like, you know, I don't care if I get hurt. Like, I'm in here and I'm enjoying it. Just go look at some of the things he said about, you know, after taking all that damage in that fight against Turner, you know, that fight that he won, right? So it's crazy. He's a guy that you go in there, I think a lot of people would be not too excited to trade with him in bare knuckle.
Love it. All right, how about you, Dan Tom? Can you think of a fighter? You pour over the tape week in and week out. I'm sure you got a gem or two up your sleeve.
Perhaps, but that's like UFC. It takes up all my time. I don't really get to follow the bare knuckle too much. I just see the highlights of like everybody doing their Elephant Man impressions with their faces afterwards. I'll probably go, since it has this circus act element, I'd probably go with like more like a kind of a circus act fighter, and I say that in the most respectful way as a fan of Japanese MMA. But no, this is not a Japanese MMA fighter, though I feel like he is due to retire in the super heavyweight division in Japan. That is William Knight, baby. Thick Willie. Where's Thick Willie been, man? We haven't seen him since the UFC. I know he kind of washed out of there, but like, can you imagine? He would look like a Tyson Punch-Out villain. You know, you put him in there like with like a Jimmy Rivera, who apparently is, you know, fighting 2 weight classes up against Jeremy Stevens this past weekend. But if we're going with that angle, you know, give me some Thick Willie in there. I want to see what that guy looks like in a bare knuckle ring.
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, I thought even before Jason Knight had that awesome fight against Artem Lobov. By the way, folks, if you haven't seen that one, go watch it. Dan, I know you said you don't consume much BKFC. Consume that one. You'll dig it. You'll thank me. I always thought he would do good because he had, you know, they used to call him Hick Diaz. He just had a little bit of that, the Diaz brother swag. And he liked to throw hands, right? Roy Nelson. These are kind of layups because they've already done it. Roy's done it for Game Bread. They do bare knuckle MMA, I suppose. But I mean, these are the guys I'm thinking about. Guys that just love to throw hands. And they love the violence. Hell, I even thought maybe Sam Alvey, although I think he's going to be competing in karate combat soon. But all he wanted to do was go out there and throw hands. A few names that were thrown out were the Diaz brothers, Drew Dober, Darren Elkins. See, I would disagree with Nuru on Darren Elkins. He likes to wrestle. Not that he hates throwing hands. I mean, he does it, but he likes to wrestle. So I kind of would disagree with that one. The Diaz brothers, yeah, that would be a good one. They like to throw hands. Their jiu-jitsu is obviously huge for them as well. Let's see here. Drew Dober, that's not a bad one. He's got some hands. Johnny Walker, he likes them knees. He likes to kick. He does like to throw hands, but he's been touched on the chin a few times. I'm not sure. I think he's doing really, really good at MMA right now. Terrence McKinney's another one that was thrown out there. Keep them coming, folks. Maybe we'll revisit this at the end. Taito Ivasa.
Dustin Poirier would be a good one.
Who?
Dustin Poirier would be a good one.
Yeah.
The best name in the chat I thought that came out of there was Robbie Lawler. I mean, can you imagine the violence that guy would bring in there? I don't know how long he'd do it. Like, there's a lot of guys that maybe can't do that for very long. I know he's got his own promotion, but look, they're looking for people to fight Mike Perry. If you bring Jorge Masvidal, a guy who basically grew up doing this, that would be fun. Robbie Lawler would be fun. There's a lot of names. It's just got to make sense. But that's the thing, is BKFC kind of grabs your attention for that moment. and then they surprise you a couple months later with something else they got cooking. But they got my attention, man.
Max Holloway was just thrown out in the
Ooh.
chat. You
Yeah,
know,
fantastic.
here's the thing. If we're really going to dive into this chat, which we don't have too much time right now, Max Holloway's a contender at 45. His style is perfect for this. I won't disagree with that. But he's made a lot of money, and I just don't know if he wants to go over and do that. That said, I thought Eddie Alvarez also made a lot of money, but he just wasn't getting scooped up after his run at one championship. They didn't bring him back to fight Chandler for part 3, and I think he just saw a decent opportunity. But I think Palomino and Perry had kind of run their course, never really became title contenders in MMA, but then they came over here and they became stars. Some of these names like Taito Iwasa, he's a top 10 fighter right now. Otherwise, I'd say Derek Lewis. He likes to throw hands, but he's still such a big name in the UFC. I just don't see him going to BKFC. But that's kind of what I was looking for. Keep them coming. If there's some good ones, I'll revisit it. And like Dan said earlier, hit that like button. It triggers an algorithm here on YouTube. So if you can do that for me right now, it would be awesome. And we got some more topics to discuss. So we're going to go forward with that. Referee Kerry Hatley was criticized for his late stoppage in the Jalen Turner-Bobby Green fight. The UFC broadcast team, social media, post-fight press conferences. Hatley got lit up pretty good. This was one of many controversies that occur during the year in our sport, but because the sport moves so quickly, we move on and reserve our emotions for the next incident. But since this was pretty universally condemned and it's fresh, just happened 36 hours ago, I want to know from the panel, how would you deal with this particular case if you were the head of the athletic commission in Texas? And what I mean by that, folks, is, you know, we say our feelings, that was a horrible stoppage, but what would we really do? And we have some experts here at Junkie who I think can give, you know, some good ideas. Matt, we'll start with you. How would you deal with this? This is in your backyard, your home state of Texas. If you're the head honcho there, how do you discuss this with referee Kerry Hatley?
I think the first thing that you have to do with him, if you're the commission, you got to, first of all, you have to make sure that he acknowledged that there was a mistake made. And he did that immediately while still in the cage with all the fighters and everybody. And he seemed, remorseful for his actions, right? But you have to go from there. Obviously, he acknowledged that there's a mistake, but then you also have to go and review other stoppages. Like, is this a trend where he's consistently stopping fights late? Just go look for any other things that could be, I guess, retaught, right? To make sure that you're not making this mistake again. He's been in the game for a very long time. And generally he does a very good job, but this was an egregious error. This wasn't a title fight. This wasn't a main event. This wasn't, anything like that you would generally let fights go on a little bit longer. A fight like this between Jalen Turner and Bobby Green, you know that they're going to be in there swinging hard. You got to be ready to step in, man, because one of those guys land, they're finishers, right? So you got to be ready to get in there. To see Jalen Turner just consistently wailing down shots as Bobby Green is just face down on the mat. I mean, the only other thing you can say is, it's not working. My button's not working, but what the F, man? Come on. It was bad.
Was that supposed to light up like Rudolph's nose?
It was supposed to say. I don't know. There it goes. Finally it works. Production error. Sorry, people.
No worries, man. All right, Dan, Tom, how about you, man? You think you've observed Hatley's work over the years. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is something I tweeted about because I always talk about it when we go to Texas. Everyone likes to pick on Texas. Everyone likes to pick on the judges. But I'm not about name throwing so much. I'm more about actually citing things. And this was a classic Dan Tom thing. Just like I said, watch out for Mackenzie Dern. She's not going to have Perillo in the corner. Everybody's like, oh my goodness, Mackenzie Dern didn't have Perillo in the corner. And I'm in the back going, I told you. This is the same thing for this one. Again, I always say it when we're in Texas and Brazil. It's Kumite stoppages, folks. It's not just Kerry Hatley is a trend to do that. Jacob Montalvo. A lot of the refs in Texas, you kind of see that. Same with Brazil, whether it's Eduardo Herdes or so on and so forth. If they have a pulse, that means apparently they're defending themselves, which is not true, by the way. Shout out to Carla Duran. A pulse is not a intelligent defense. And even that being said, and me, somebody who actually spots these trends, actually attends the ABC courses, pause and note, I'm going to incorporate that into my answer for George here. Yeah, even me, that was effing disgusting. And I had to use the word and spell it out even on Twitter. Yes, Twitter. It was gross, because even somebody who was expecting that, and those style of stoppages, it was really gross to see. I'm a really big Bobby Green fan, but it doesn't matter if you're a fan or not. That stoppage was inexcusable. It's good that Kerry Hatley, to Dana's point, didn't do what other referees or judges have done, and they go out and defend themselves in a very ignorant way. That being said, I do believe there are things you can do. Texas is one of the only commissions that allows the refs to judge and ref. And in Kerry Hatley's defense, he is actually the main guy who normally does that. And even though he didn't ironically do that tonight, so you can't blame that dual concentration for his mistake there. Usually he does on almost every other night, dating back to like UFC, like Hidalgo with Poirier Johnson, right? Like you will see Kerry Hatley reffing and officiate and judging as well, I should say. So what I would say is maybe not to take a paycheck away from the guy, maybe let him, make his pennies, judging, because he actually is a pretty good judge. From what I call, he's very often, he's very few times, I should say, the out judge, right? So let him make his money. We're not trying to cancel anybody here, right? Let him make his money judging. But I would like to see him, back in the referee courses. For example, when I did the ABC qualifying for the beginners ref courses, the beginning judges courses, even in the beginners courses that I'm in, and I should be in, by the way, I still saw noted, judges like Eric Colon or Adelaide Bird, who gets a lot of crap from a lot of fans, right? Say what you will about Adelaide Bird. She was there in the judging trainings and doing recertifications that I imagine they don't necessarily need to do, but they are doing, right? So if these veteran judges and officials are retaking courses and qualifying, well, I think that would be maybe another good thing to add. Again, we're not trying to cancel anybody, take away their paychecks, but I would hope to see Kerry Hatley with the other Texas officials who were there and try to improve and better themselves to defend the Texas Commission a bit. But yes, don't let them ref for a bit, let them judge, send them back to some re-education courses.
Great stuff, Dan. Really, really good stuff there. All right, Goes, how about you, man? What do you think of this situation with Kerry Hatley and that late stoppage in the Jalen Turner Bobby Green fight?
It's unfortunate. Look, I always try and give these refs and judges the benefit of the doubt. It's an incredibly tough, difficult job for anyone to do. But look, man, in this particular situation, the night of I watched it, I was disgusted. I went back, I watched it again, and I tried to put myself in his shoes and see where there were moments where I could maybe understand any of it. There were a couple movements that I think maybe bought him a couple seconds more. But after that, there was a good stretch that we're watching right now where something needed to happen. And it didn't. It's pretty much as bad as it gets, right? So I think in this situation, covering the sport for as long as we have, I think we've seen referees go through this before. And what usually tends to happen, guys, is they put them right back out there and it happens again and again. Sometimes it goes in like waves of threes. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there are times where like even some of the top dogs like Herb Dean, I remember once had like a really bad month. There's too much stress on these guys to just throw them back out there and let them shake it off. This is not the sport to shake something off. All right. Especially with social media and so many people's opinions just one button away. It's a lot to take in. You need to step away. If you're the Texas Commission, you need to take this guy and you need to just shelve him for a little bit. Nobody's saying put him away for years or anything like that, but let him sit for about a month. And really, it's more so because if you go back and you watch it, he's going to understand that he did something wrong. He already did. But it's more to just kind of level out his psyche, his feelings, because he's getting crushed right now. Bobby Green, we still need to figure out like what exactly happened to him because he took a lot of damage, man. And if you're the cause of that, that's a lot of stress to carry. So I think for Kerry Hatley, we got to put him on the shelf for a little bit. There's a lot of media coming down on him, referees, fighters. It's the toughest job, but you know what? He signed up for it. Here's the big problem, guys. It's not like any other job where one guy walks away and there's 30 guys that are just waiting to take your job. It's not really like that. So whoever we put in to replace him right away, I don't know that he's going to do that much better of a job than Kerry Hatley. For the most part, Kerry Hatley's okay. But right now he needs to go away just for a little bit. There has to be repercussions. We have to show the fighters that we care for them, that we're looking out for them, right? They deserve that. And I think Kerry Hatley would understand that. Go away for a little bit, then come back. But long term, like Dan mentioned, at those commission meetings, it was a good thing to see that there's more people trying to get involved, because that pool of judges, referees, it's not that big, guys. And really, it's all comes down to experience. We need to get these guys experience on the smaller shows so that things like this do happen. We do have credible guys that are willing to step in.
Good point goes to close. You're right. Who does go in if we suspend Kerry Hatley, which I think we're all in agreement. I like the 90-day mark personally. I think that's a good time to refresh. And I love Dan's point about the fact that he can judge because he's got a livelihood, obviously. He can still judge, but let's pull him away from this. Let him get some reps in. Maybe, not recertification, but a little bit more training or whatever. I don't want to say let them work smaller shows necessarily. The pressure is less for sure, but it's not, their lives aren't any less meaningful, right? Their health and safety is not any less meaningful, but I think the pressure might be a little more easier that he can deal with. So maybe that's not a crazy thing to think. Just because the PFL and Bellator and UFC doesn't go to Texas doesn't mean that they don't have shows happening this Friday on a smaller scale. And those are a lot of times are those referees that work them. So it's a fine line, but I do like pulling him away because this type of backlash that he's receiving, I think, can mess with him a little bit. So somewhere between 30 to 90 days, just pulling away from reffing at all, I think would be a nice start. And then having him rework his mechanics, with some other refs, just to make sure everything's good. I can only think of like police officers when there's a shooting, regardless of whose fault it is, they like to pull them off the streets and then they work with them. And then I'm not sure if it's a 2-week or 1 month period or maybe even longer, depending on the situation where they're able to go back and work. So I do want to say I've seen Hatley perform for many years and I've never thought him to be anything other than a very competent ref. This was just a bad call. I see what Goes is talking about. I saw a couple subtle movements from Green and I think he was giving him every last chance, but he had already probably crossed the threshold because that was a pretty vicious knockdown, and then there was a couple follow-ups that really, really thumped him after that. So even with subtle movements or not, there still was a few punches that, Turner was just putting it on him. Could have really, really hurt him. So yeah, this is well-deserved criticism for what I still believe is a good ref, and I think he still has a future, but something needs to happen. Good stuff, guys. We move on though. What MMA fighter gained the most traction after this weekend's action and why? You guys know the names. I don't even think I need to throw them out there for you, but a lot of fighters kind of took a next step. Dan, how about you? Who's your guy or gal?
Yeah, it's easy to make an argument at the top, but I think I was going to go with Figueiredo here, just because I feel like, with the former champion thing, there's a lot of fatigue that kind of Matt said earlier, and I agree, by the way, the rematch fatigue, the getting the former champions and the title pictures fatigue, but it is a trend nonetheless, right? So it's one we got to pay attention to, and it's going to give Figgy, kind of a faster ladder to the top. So that's the guy I'm really going to be watching out for after this weekend.
I like it. That was a good one. Impressed the hell out of me. I thought he was A, gonna lose, and B, just maybe wilt later on due to Font and the experience that he has as a bantamweight, man. But he proved me wrong for all 15 minutes. How about you, Goes? Who gained the most traction after this weekend's action?
I got to ditto my man Dan Tom, man. What Figueiredo did, I don't know that a lot of people understand. Like when you go up a division, just kind of being somewhat successful is impressive. You're doing this with bigger guys. Some guys are faster, some guys are stronger. It's completely different. So for him to go over there and pick off a stud like Rob Font is a tough out, man. That to me was a very, very big deal. And he just felt like he was one step ahead the entire fight. There was no feeling out process for him at this weight class. He went in there and he did his job. And what that does is beating a guy like Rob Font kind of sets that foundation for what could be next. Things could come a lot quicker, right? The only thing that scares me is I think at the end of the day, he's like 5'4", 5'5". You got guys like at the top, O'Malley, even Corey Sandhagen, they're like in the 5'11", 5'10" range. That could be very difficult. But if anybody could figure out, it's this guy. But going forward, like I'm excited to see his next fight. It just feels like this is where he probably belongs to be.
Matt Wells, how about you?
Yeah, I think the biggest winner for me was Sean Brady. You look at who he fought in Kelvin Gastelum, who was coming down from middleweight. You would kind of think that maybe Kelvin would have like a little bit of a power advantage. I know Kelvin is a guy who's floated back and forth over the years, but Sean Brady made it look easy, man. He went in there, put it on Kelvin, didn't look like it was a problem in the grappling department, and really looked like one of those guys that's going to be a title contender. But also, I'll give you this. Because Brady looked so good, he also made someone else look really good in Bilal Muhammad. Because you think back to how Bilal Muhammad and what he did to Sean Brady, man, how good is Bilal? That's a guy that's already number 2 in our rankings in the welterweight division on MMA Junkies rankings. I mean, listen, how good is Bilal? Really, really, how good is he? I want an answer. Somebody, give me an answer.
He's pretty
really
good. He's on a roll, man. He really is on a roll. I think that a lot of the heat came from that fight, that fight with Edwards that wasn't going his way. But what we've noticed from Bilal is he really can make adjustments, turn it around. He's a dog all the way through. And I think he took a lot of critique from that fight, just like, oh no, man, you're not ready for that next level. I think Usman was still champ at that time. But boy, that guy's impressed me, man. That's a good pull there from someone who didn't fight, but yet his stock also went up. I'm going to say Miesha Tate, and I'll tell you why. I really thought she was ready to lay down the gloves if she didn't come through on Saturday. Both, UFC moms, mid-30s, layoffs, weight gains, whatever. I think that's the story with Avila at least. But Miesha just dealt with that loss at flyweight and said, that was a mistake. But here I am. I ain't going out like a sucker at 35, where she ruled as a champ at Strikeforce and UFC and looked good and applied what her skill is, and that's wrestling, man. She really, really looked good. And now I see her instantly as someone who possibly could compete for a title. Why? Because she's got the name. She's a former champ. And a lot of her contemporaries are kind of out of the way now. So I'm not saying she's next, but we have it's Juliana, who's her homie, right? She's off to the side. I think she's got next. She's got the quarter up on the game. But we got Raquel and Mayra Bueno Silva. But if Juliana's still injured, you never know, man. That's how the UFC rolls. That's how they make their decisions. So I thought the stock went up. I'm not calling for her to be next. I'm not saying that, but she impressed the hell out of me. She looks like she's not ready to retire. All right. Let's see here. We're going to do some additionals. I think we have some time for this. Can the UFC do more to avoid public spats between athletes and their camps, or do we just chalk it up to that's the fight game, as Dana White says? Goes, what do you think?
Well, I mean, look, man, if we're all out somewhere, the 4 of us, and we start fighting, are you telling me there's not going to be some kind of consequence to what we've done, right? That's the world that we really live in. I think what has to happen, like I understand this is an edgy sport, and from time to time this is going to happen. But you have to kind of lay down some kind of law. Otherwise, it's just going to repeatedly happen. And you never know when one of these situations, like this was a hotel, right? They could bump into somebody could fall down, there could be a lawsuit. All I'm saying is, if I'm the UFC, I don't know that you got to like fine anyone or anything like that. But I think you at least pick up the phone and you go, look, guys, part of a main event here. There's a lot on the line. If you continue to do this type of behavior, I am not going to feel comfortable putting you in these positions because I need you to be professional. And I think that's a big enough scare for fighters to go, all right, man, like I can't be screwing these positions up. I don't blame Bobby Green. I mean, dude was just chilling. He came up to him and got in his face. But I don't know that we can just kind of put it off to the side and just go, fighters are going to be fighters. Like, it's not always going to work out that way.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Matt? Was this thing getting out of hand? Because he told you there's a lot that goes on that we don't even know about. All I keep thinking about is DC and Jones in that hotel lobby at MGM. That one got ugly.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's been around the game long enough, and folks like ourselves that cover these events live, we hear stories about stuff that goes on that doesn't necessarily, make it to public view for whatever reason, right? But I think they do a pretty good job as is. Like most of the time, like there's some UFC security around nearby. Like even in this interaction, like we saw that there was someone right there ready to kind of stop it from escalating, right? Aside from like if a security guard like sees someone down the hallway and being like, all right, we're going to redirect before you even get there. Like they do a pretty good job as it is. But most of the time, like these fighters don't even care. Like we'll see all the time, like they'll try to force through and, you know, maybe it's like a hold me back sort of situation, but just to make a scene. But yeah, there's not too much more that they can do. Fighters are going to be fighters. Tempers are going to flare. You know, a lot of guys are going to puff their chests out for whatever reason. Sometimes they do it just to make, you know, these little viral moments. You know, sometimes there's really not a true beef there. So it's, you know, who knows their true intentions, but I think the UFC does a pretty good job of handling these situations when they come up.
What do you think, Dan? Is it the fight game or can more be done?
I mean, it is the fight game and it is going to happen, but not to defend what Dana said, even though there is some truth there. I will kind of deflect and say, you know, code of conduct policy is the obvious thing, but we've seen how consistent the UFC is with that for what, a decade now, dating back to Miguel Torres on Twitter to everything else, right? I mean, we've kind of seen inconsistencies there. And, you know, it's surprising that, you know, the coaches are sometimes involved, or the team, because aren't those people that are supposed to be telling you to keep it cool, especially when those people are kind of dependent on you for a percentage of your paycheck? Like, you not only have to make the fight day, but hopefully you win, because if you're a coach, you're going to see a little more money or money at all. But it's funny in that Arman and Bobby Green thing, you know, and I love Pahumpa, but it's like you look at like the coaches' faces, you'll see them like smiling, like, oh, this is gonna be cool. And then when it gets out of hand, you look at their faces and they're just like, well, how did this happen? Like, what did you guys think was gonna happen? You were just 2 seconds ago walking up with the S-eating grin on your face, and now you're gonna act surprised. You know what I'm saying? But like, to answer this question, Bobby Green said, what do you see in that video? He goes, oh, I don't play like this. No. And what I think he was saying was that I think almost like Bobby Green is like, oh, I don't even think Bobby Green necessarily took it personal or thought it was personal. It's almost like he knew that this is the game now. Oh, we got to film confrontations. We got to do this whole thing.
Yeah.
And Bobby Green's one of those dudes, man. He doesn't play like that. He keeps it real. And the thing is, if UFC is going to reward people like this, you know, because again, it's like, oh, we're against it or this or that, but if it's McGregor and a bus attack, UFC 223 or whatever, we can use that for our promotionals. So if UFC is going to keep rewarding people with not just matchups, but even using these handheld footage of these incidents, these viral footages, and playing into the kind of like the culture that's going on right now, it's only going to be not just worse, but arguably encouraged for the fighters to continue to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love when they break up fights like this with one arm and the other one filming. You know, hey guys, it's gone too far. It's gone too far.
He walked up with a crew and the camera ready when he first came at Bobby that first time. I mean,
honestly,
he was looking for a moment.
What are you gonna do? Like, let's just say, however many security guards they have, let's say you add 10 more. Are they gonna stop these guys? These are professional athletes, and the guys in their corners are also badasses. Like, you can put as many security guards as you want. I don't know that you're going to stop the situation. It's got to come from the top, you know?
Nuru in the chat says the problem is, in spite of saying they hate it, the UFC gets promotional juice out of these ring spots. So they will say they hate it, but quietly not change it. Good point. By the way, a name was thrown out at the top, and I saved it because I said I'd circle back if it was a good one. Ace 100 came up with Calvin Cater for bare knuckle action. I think this one's for you, Matt, by the way. Carlos J, any word on the PFL pay-per-view buys for their last event? I think he's obviously joking. You know, I did want to say something to him. I'm not trying to be Captain Save-A-Bro here for my colleague, Matt. But that question tripped me out because how many times have numbers been thrown out and Dana will sit there and go, you guys have no idea what the numbers are. And yet now he's going to the media member who he has a problem with and saying, do you know that it's your job? Shouldn't you know? I was surprised Matt didn't go, you were in Boston. You didn't know about the incident with Arman and Bobby. You're the president. Shouldn't you know? I mean, that little game, you know, it's just such a juvenile game that he can do. And he's a G. That's what I hate, is that he won the game. He created a sport. It's popping. It makes money. And a lot of people thrive from it, including us, you know, but yet he still has these moments where he becomes eighth grader, you know.
I think Matt just triggered him with the question prior, you know, because he used the word. It was for the Jamal Hill story, but Matt did use the word domestic violence, so maybe that triggered Dana there.
Interesting take.
Remember, because his answer, he goes, it's family stuff. Like his answer was so like answering for himself while still trying to answer the question. Like it was so like you could just see it. Like, and I think like that, like you want to talk Psych 101. I think that's what put it up, right? You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't.
I didn't think of that.
You know, and Matt didn't say anything wrong there. Obviously, I'm more speaking to Dana's history. That's not that far away. With domestic violence. So maybe that got him riled up. He thought like, he saw, maybe a face he's not as familiar with, and he's just like, oh, the gotcha media. Back to what you said, George, right? Because that's his convenient scapegoat. Blame the media. Oh,
Salvadorized in the chat says Dana White won. He is a G, but he's small and petty. And there is some truth to that. I know I'm going to go over here. Cold Coffee's going to lay into me pretty good after the show, but hey, we have a big fight card this week, and let me just get a quick thought from each one of you. Song versus Gutierrez. The bantamweight division is always popping. Anthony Smith, Khalil Roundtree, or any other fight. Any quick thoughts on it? Matt, we'll start with you.
I mean, the main event's a banger. Like you said, bantamweight is always on fire, right? These are fantastic matchups here. I do want to give props to Anthony Smith for stepping up in this fight, though. Like that's pretty dope. It's an unexpected matchup against Khalil Roundtree, and I know some people were criticizing Khalil for taking this fight because it seems like a lot of people seem Anthony Smith's just going to win, but I think that's still going to be a solid fight. Solid top at the top of the card.
Goes. How about you, man?
Some of the hardest strikes I've ever heard in person have come from Khalil Roundtree. I think him and Anthony Smith is going to be an absolute war.
Yeah, we covered that guy at Tough Enough. So we've seen him come through as an amateur, and now as a pro, he's a beast. How about you, Dan Tom? Anything jump out at you from this weekend's card? By the way, now back in the Apex.
Yeah, as per usual, I'll be breaking it down on my channel, Daniel Tom MMA, the Protect Your Neck podcast on Thursday. But I will just shout out real quick.
Podcast, folks, especially if you gamble. Go check out Protect Your Neck.
Appreciate it.
Available on YouTube or get it in the podcast form, whatever you like. It's there for you. Dan pours his heart into it.
Too kind. I just want to shout out the best dancer in the UFC, Jong Young Park.
All right, so yeah,
Iron Turtle.
Check it out. My personal favorite, I think, aside from the top two, obviously, I really think Hackprass and Malarkey is going to deliver fireworks, possible fight of the night. And of course, at MMA Junkie, we're going to cover it. Pre-fight, cover fight nights, post-fight, all the best coverage is here at MMA Junkie. We cover the biggest stories the following Monday, every Monday, live, just like you saw it now. It's noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. All of us here at MMA Junkie, we take our turns being part of the panel. I think you guys will dig it. Share it with a friend, retweet, repost, whatever it takes. And one last request for that like and subscribe. It really, really helps us just getting it out there in front of more eyeballs on YouTube. Shout out to the Facebook group as well. I know you guys catch the show on Facebook, so shout out to you guys. With that, we are out of here. Enjoy the rest of the week. Keep it locked on MMA Junkie for the best coverage in mixed martial arts, and we'll see you next Monday. Go out and be a champion.